Hi guys, welcome to another tutorial from Brims Labs. So in this tutorial, I wanted to teach you what state management are and why it is important. Now, after watching this tutorial, you should be able to understand perfectly what state management are and how to actually use them in your program. That when you're actually implementing state management in your mobile application or web application, you will completely understand what you're doing and where you're going to. And the main reason why I choose to actually create this tutorial is because most of the tutorials I've seen on state management is how to use some kind of libraries to actually implement state libraries. To actually implement state management without going into detail to show you how or the purpose of state management. So the entire essence of this tutorial is to actually explain what state management is to you and how it is important to your application so that when you're actually using them or when you're actually implementing the concept, you understand what you're actually talking about. Okay, so what is a state management? Or first of all, what is a state? Now, by definition, a state refers to the data or information that is held by your application. It represents the current status of your application. Now, let me give you an instance. Let's say you log into your Facebook account. Let's say you have a Facebook account on two mobile phones, and then in one of your mobile phone, you receive a notification that you have a new friend request, or you have a new follower in your account. Now, when you open that particular account, you should see maybe if you have 6 followers before and there's a new follower, and then that should make it seven followers, right? Now, if you open that same Facebook account in your second phone, you are expected to see 7 followers there so that it will be the same with your previous phone. Okay, so the number of followers you have at that particular account is what we call a state. So because the number of followers is the data, the current state of that data in your own account is 7. But let's assume you log into your second phone and you realize that what is actually there is 6. It means that the state is actually not consistent, right? So the reason why we talked about state management is so that we can be able to create an application where the entire state is actually very, very consistent across all the devices we use or across the entire application we are going to entirety of our application. And then we are going to look at that um, more in depth. But let us go into details and see how state management actually works. Okay. Okay. Now let's think about this. Um let's think about an e-commerce website. Let's say in an e-commerce website, let's say something like Amazon, and then you want to shop in an Amazon application, right? And in an Amazon application, now you log in with, let's say, this device. So let's talk about this device now. So you log in with this particular device, let's say device one. So in device one, you add 2 cakes to your cart. Okay. So let's say that this is our cart. So let's say this is our cart now. Let's say this is our cart. Now, in device one, when you log into this cart, you actually add 2 cakes to that. And then maybe subsequently you use another device. Let's call this device 2. And then you also add when you open that same account, that same Amazon account in device 2, you're expected to see 2 cakes that you've added using device 1 into this particular account. Now, the way this works is that there's something called a store. You can call it different names depending on um, how the person or the technology or library that the person is using. But let's just call it a store because that is like the popular name that they call this. Now, what happens is that when you add these 2 cakes to the store, to your cart, that cake or the number of cake you've added is actually now added to something called the cart store. Now, the cart store is just like a virtual storage system that holds the number or the quantity of cakes that you've added to your cart. The reason why this store or this storage exists is so that every part of your application or any part of your device that is looking towards or that is going to use the number of cake that you've added to your cart will be looking at that particular place. Now, naturally, what you should have done if there was no state or if there was no store is that when you added this cake to your cart, what would have happened is that you send this number of cake to the server. So that when you're opening this particular device when you're opening this particular account from another device, it will fetch that particular data from the server. But there's a problem. The problem there is that maybe there can be a network problem, so the second device will not be able to connect properly to the server, and so the number of cakes you have in your carts will not show or will not show immediately. Or in fact, there can be something called inconsistency, making it difficult for you to see the number of cakes. Or maybe you can come here and you see 0 cakes instead of like 2 cakes, right? So instead of us to do all of those things, try to make network requests to actually get the number of stuff. What we do is that we have something called the cat store, where we simply just, when we add something to our cart, or when we change the data, or when the data in our application changes, it reflects it on that store, so that every devices that is looking at that store will get the exact same stuff. Now what I mean is that, let's assume we have another device here. Let me copy this. Let me try to make this to be 2. So let's say we have another device, and we have a device somewhere here, and let's say we have another device somewhere here. So just a moment, please. So let's say we have another device here, and we can call this device device 3. Device 3. Now this device can still get the same number of cakes we have added to our cart in device 1 by simply just looking at this cart store. So by simply just washing this cart store, this device can also get the number of cakes that we've added, which is also 2, right? So any number of application that is looking at this store, or any component or any part of our application that is looking at this store, will get the exact number of cakes that we've added to our cart, because all of them are looking at a simple or simplified or common storage that our application is added. Let me show you practically how this works. Okay, so I have just a very simple application right here, and this application is a simple e-commerce application that I built to practicalize this. Now I'm going to add a few things to the cart right here. So this is the cart right here. I'm going to add a few things to that. So I've added one item. Let me add another one. So I've added another one. The quantity is 1 for each of them. I can increase the quantity here, and you can see that the number of stuff, or the number of item in our cart is 2, right? And it look, pay attention to the price and the quantity, right? And the total order. Now this can look very simple. I think I've already opened that. So this looks very simple because it kind of closer to the item that we are adding. But there can be other parts of our application that also wants to know the number of items that are in our cart, or the number of items that we are checking out. For this particular application is the confirmation model. So we have a confirmation model that also wants to know the number of carts, or the number of items in our cart. With that state management, what would have happened is that when we add an item to cart here, one of the approach we can choose would have been to send this particular record to our database, okay? And so that when other item wants to get the total number of stuff in our cart, they will have to do a network request. But like I said previously, that is going to cost a lot of stuff, including a lot of resource usage, time wasting, inconsistency and stuff. So, but in this application, we have a simple cart store that every application that wants to use this similar data are watching. One of those components is our model. So if I click on confirm here, you should see that the same number of items in our cart is actually looking at this particular guy, or it's actually appearing here. And what this guy has done is not network request. You can see it's very fast. So what it has actually done now is that it has simply fetched that same information that is in the cart, or that is in the cart store, and display it, which makes it very fast for everybody to actually use, right? So state management is what allows us to like store our data so that it can be accessed globally, or accessed by every component that is looking for that particular data on time. Okay, like a very good example again is, let's say you store something in your phone, you receive an email in one of your phone, you want that same email to appear in your computer. Okay, it helps you, it promotes something called synchronization, right? So if something is happening in this device, we want that particular stuff to happen in another device. We use state management to make that actually work properly. So now let's look at some types of states that we have in application. Okay, so I'm going to do this again. So there are about 4 types of states that we have in our application that we can have example of state. So one of them is local state. So local state can be like a form input or a toggle button. So let's say for instance now you want to change the current theme of your application. So if you're a developer, you know that something like VS Code has different theme. So when you change the theme color, you want that particular theme color to be available everywhere, all around the application. So that is an example, or a perfect example of local state. Another example is, let's say you are increasing the number of items. maybe you're doing calculation and you want to add or increment the number of stuff. Okay, that is a local state, because when that changes, you want every data in your local state, okay, or in your application to actually also reflect that particular number. Another one we have, another example is global state. So global state is a perfect example of global state is, think about something like user authentication or user authentication status, right? So if a user logs in, if a user logs in into your application, that user should be able to access all parts of your application, right? So if a new user logs into Facebook now, that new user details should be reflective across the application. For instance, the person's pages to show, the person's subscription to show, the person's username, the person's followers, the person's friends should actually show. So that is an example of a global state, because when something like this changes, the entirety of the application state will also change. So for example, if the user has subscribed to a premium feature, the user should be able to access that. Now it is also different when the user is not able to log in. So something can happen, or you can create a difference of what should happen when somebody is logged in or when somebody is not logged in. So that's the example of a global state. Another one example is server state. Now server state is when you make an API call, all right? So when multiple applications are making API call to a single API server, they should be able to get the same kind of data. Okay, so if we say we have two device making or two clients device making API requests to a single server, all of them should have the same data. One shouldn't have different data from the next one. So let's say we are building a front-end application and you want to fetch your own account data from your social media application. Now, if two devices are making that request, if the user has 5 friends, those 5 friends should be showed in the same or in those two devices. So this one shouldn't show a different number of friends, this one shouldn't show a different number of friends. Okay, so that is what we call server state. Is the state of the data consistent in those different devices that are making those requests to that particular one. Now another state we can talk about is URL state or query parameter state. So query parameter state is when you're searching something on Google, or when you want to switch a page. Let's say you want to switch from page 1 to page 2. So once immediately you switch from page 1 to page 2, the content that is showing in page 2 should also be different from the content that is showing in page 1. Or when you search something, the information that is coming from your search query should be different from other kind of information. So the simple example or the common example of state we have is local state, global state, server state, and URL state. All right. So now there are popular libraries, and this is where a lot of people focus on teaching people how to actually use these libraries. Okay, so there are popular libraries that are available for implementing state management. Now, these libraries are not there to actually replace or to actually create state management. They are here to actually help you to properly implement the state management. The difference between most of these libraries are just the way you go about using them, right, to actually implement them. In front end, the most popular one is Redux, which is common when you're working with React and stuff like that. You use Redux to actually implement state management, but there are also very new ones on the blog which are also very simple and as well as powerful. My personal favorite is Zustand and Reactquery. Now, Zustand and Reactquery actually gives you ability to create both local and server, both local states and server state management. Okay, so if you combine both React Query and Zustand, you can create any kind of application that you want to create. In mobile application, we have Riverpod and providers which are very popular when you're working in Flutter. We also have Vuex, which is very popular when you're working with React Native. Okay, and then for Java, we have Jackpad, View Model, and Live Data. And then if you're working with Swift, you have Swift UI State. Those are some examples of popular state management libraries that are available. I won't say this is better than this. You have to actually make your choice after working with some of these libraries. For some instances, your employer or the person you're working with might have already have a choice of the kind of library you should use. So for us to recap once again, state management is how we manage the data consistency in our application, making sure that when the data changes in one part of our application, it reflects immediately in other parts of our application that are dependent on those data, right? So the importance of state management is that it allows us to make our application to be consistent, okay? Making sure that data that changes in one section reflects in the other section. There are also advantages like synchronization in the instances of email, where you might want to make sure that every email that is in one device is also showing in other device that subscribes to it. We've also gone over the examples of all of these things. Also gone over the examples, and we've seen how we can actually use all of these things to improve. So that was a very short explanation of what um, state management is and how you can use them in your application. So if you have any other question, or if there is a place you want me to make further improvement, just drop me a message and I'll be able to respond to you immediately. Thank you, and see you in the next tutorial.